The way we lead impacts the way people live. This world needs truly human leadership. I'm Brent Stewart, your host. Thanks for listening. This podcast is an outreach of Barry-Wehmiller. You can connect with us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter at Barry-Wehmiller, and find our podcasts, articles, and videos at trulyhumanleadership.com. You're listening to a Truly Human Leadership podcast refresher, where we reshare insight from podcast episodes from the past. Do you feel like there are days when you go to work and there's one hurdle after another that through no fault of your own keep you from being productive? You've told other people in your organization about these hurdles and inefficient processes, but they basically shrug and say that's the way we've always done things. When you go to work every day and that cycle of frustration keeps repeating, does it make you feel like the work you do doesn't matter? And how does that make you feel when you go home at night? Over the last 30 years, Barry-Wehmiller has acquired companies, each one with its own challenges. So we've seen lots of frustration from people within those broken businesses who didn't feel like anyone was listening to them. On this podcast, you'll hear about how we at Barry-Wehmiller try to eliminate as much frustration as possible from the work lives of our team members so they could go home happier and more fulfilled. In 2006, Barry-Wehmiller decided to embrace the principles of Lean, an operating philosophy developed by Toyota and written about extensively by a professor named Jim Womack. But of course, because Barry-Wehmiller measures success by the way we touch the lives of people, we went about things a little differently. To begin to explain what Lean is and why companies, including Barry-Wehmiller, look to incorporate Lean principles into their business, here's Jerry Solomon, a retired BW team member who's also written books on the subject of Lean, followed by Barry-Wehmiller CEO Bob Chapman.
Well, we try to embrace Lean and incorporate it in whatever we do here. It's like the GPL. It's a way of life. So whether we call it GPL, whether we call it L3, whether we call it Lean, it really is all the same thing. It's how we treat people, how we want to work for a company that focuses on continuous improvement, how we want to empower people, engage their minds and their hearts, not just their arms and legs, and realize that we're all in this together, trying to improve the company, at the same time improve our lives, our long-term security, and our life at home as well. It has an impact on everything we do. Some companies or heads of companies start Lean with the idea of the lean and mean. Well, lean means less employees and now. So they're in it for the quick fix. They really have no idea what true Lean is all about. People typically do describe Lean as the elimination of waste, or doing more with less, or doing the same with less. And that's a terrible message, because, what's the message when you say it's about eliminating waste, and the next thing you know, you're laying off people? You're basically saying people are waste, and you're watching people go out the door. And, I'm so proud to work for a company like Barry-Wehmiller that understands that we're only as good as the people. And, Bob has challenged leaders to make way, or to find ways that we don't need to eliminate people. That's not in our culture. Great leadership will find ways to redeploy people, or even better yet, grow the business so that we could do a lot more with the same people, and better people, and more engaged people. So that's kind of the difference of traditional description of Lean. We hope, we practice a different kind of Lean here, and we're in it for the long term. And what that means, we have to develop people. We have to build great people, and great people do great things. So we have to be a little bit more patient with the way we do it, and we have to do a lot of teaching, hence Barry-Wehmiller University, those kinds of things. So it's very, very different. In the Lean community, and Bob has said it often on his speeches, and we share the fact that 97% of companies going down a Lean journey really don't achieve what we would call Lean. And one would ask why.
I gave a talk to one of the largest companies in the state of Wisconsin, a global company, and they invited me to speak because they saw the way we approach the concepts of Lean. And they asked us to come and speak at their global operations meeting in O'Hare, and they had 75 people from around the world that ran this $20 billion division. of a much larger company. And I sat down with the group when I came to talk just like this, and I said, why did you embrace the concepts of lean? And they said, to improve margin on our product. And I said, well, you haven't got a chance. Do you actually think your team members are going to go home each night saying, boy, we just improved the profitability of the company a little bit today? So the problem of this concept is people started with the wrong reason. The power of lean is that you begin to listen. I was telling a group just a minute ago, when I got my undergraduate degree from Indiana and my graduate degree, MBA from Michigan, I thought it was all about me and my success. I thought I was getting a good education, going to get good experience, get a good job, so I could tell people what to do. That's what bosses do, okay? They tell people what to do. And what Jim Womack really discovered, which he doesn't understand, is he learned to flip that upside down and say, you know, you have gifts and talents. You know what you're doing. I'll bet together, if we sit down, we could figure out how to do it better and it'd be more fun. You will probably reduce costs when you allow people, the environment, to share their gifts. But that will be a byproduct, not the reason. So the power of lean is it flipped what management is, what bosses were, what supervisors were, and the people who do the various tasks within companies, within departments. They know how to do it better, but nobody ever asked them. Remember, I was never taught in my leadership, in my education, to care about you. It was always about me. That's the way we teach. That's why we have the broken leadership in this country that we do in every facet of our country. In the field of manufacturing, I'm sure it's true here, 70% of people in America are not engaged in what they do. Their heart and soul is not involved. It's a job. They do what they have to do to not get fired, okay, or reprimanded, but they're not sharing their gifts fully. They're not giving them themselves because it's just a job, okay? 70% of American companies and organizations, hospitals, United States, everybody's embracing lean. Everybody's embracing because the idea is powerful, but the way it has been embraced is horrible. Only 3% are successful, according to this survey. So what's insanity? We keep gathering together in these rooms and we keep doing the same stupid things. Okay, we talk about cost reduction, process improvement. To me, what we've got is we've got a Ferrari engine in lean, but we forgot to put fuel in the tank, which is the human side. Lean is an unbelievable idea because we listen to people and we release their gifts, and they do wonderful things, amazing things, if we release their gifts. But when we try and manage them, when we try and focus on cost reduction, we don't inspire them. So you've got to inspire people, not manage. You can't manage. That's why lean fails all the time. It is mandated. I go to the lean meeting. Why? Because I'm told to. The people in the field of lean who come involved in ours say the biggest single thing we do in a report out session is ask somebody who's reporting, how did it make you feel? And people cry. They cry because it's the first time anybody's ever asked them what they think.
Dick Ryan, another Barry-Wehmiller team member who played an important part in our lean journey, expands on Bob's comments on how Barry-Wehmiller looks at lean principles differently.
We, Barry-Wehmiller, talk about having a vision to send everyone home every day fulfilled. Okay? And then we'll say we'll provide the lean tools as the methodology to help you become fulfilled. All right? So if you look at most businesses, if you look at Wire Mold, company I work for, we started with kind of a focus on numbers. And we had some layoffs early on, and then we began to get more in touch with respect for people. So most companies start with a drive for number, and the people are kind of there as part of the equation. What we want to do is we want to start with what can we do to make your job more fulfilling? And that's a wide open question because everybody in this room has a different reason, right, on how you'll be fulfilled. And tougher yet, how do you measure it? How do we put a graph together that says we're doing great with fulfillment? That's our challenge right now. We don't have all those answers. We know that one of the answers is if we can come up with hundreds of stories, that's a metric for us, but it's not a graph type thing, okay? So this balance of focusing on people and getting results, or getting results and then focus on people, you really have to think that through, and we had to think it through a lot. Because I can tell you, even with our focus on people, Bob Chapman will go around for his regular quarterly, monthly reviews on how the business is doing financially. So in one session, we're talking about focusing on people, and then Bob goes to the leadership and said, remember, we get a financial report, and he says, remember, team, 800 people depend on your ability as leaders to run this business profitably. It's not, you must make the number this quarter, or you must make it this month. It's, remember, 800 families, which probably means 4,000 people in the community are depending on you to be a financially sound business. That's totally different than make the number. I think you'd agree. So that's what makes us different.
There are a few key moments in our lean journey that Bob Chapman and Raj Sisodia write about in their new book, Everybody Matters, The Extraordinary Power of Caring for Your People Like Family. Listen as Barry-Wehmiller's Chief People Officer, Rhonda Spencer, and Brian Wellinghoff, BW's Lean Journey Director, and then again Dick Ryan, tell this story.
So how we got there was that we had this vision of culture, but we weren't quite sure how we were going to do it. We also had one of our divisions who was on the lean journey, but it was probably more of a metrics-focused journey than anything. But then we had a big challenge. We bought a company in Green Bay, Wisconsin that was like most companies we buy companies that are struggling. We buy American manufacturing companies that are not doing well, that are threatened in their very existence. And we know how to add value to those companies, and we know how to do it by keeping them right where they are in the U.S. And so this company, PCMC, had faced a challenge from its largest customer, which was Procter & Gamble. Procter & Gamble said, we looked at our business in tissue. We need to take 40% out of the capital equipment cost in tissue. You're our largest supplier. You need to take 40% out, and we know how you can do it. Move your business to China. And so faced with that challenge, the leader of that business was a third-generation leader, and he was seriously considering that. But he couldn't even get it done quick enough. They faced a cash crisis, and we went in and bought the company. And so the first thing that Bob Chapman and the president of that division, Tim Sullivan, came in and said, so we had been having the stimulus of this idea of lean and a way to bring it together with our culture. And they came into that business and said, we are going to make you a viable supplier for Procter & Gamble and every other company, and we are not going to do it by moving to China. We're going to do it right here in the U.S., and we're going to do it with lean. So for us, that was really the impetus that we needed to start the journey in earnest across the entire organization. So we started by stepping back and saying, how can we do it differently? And we said, if this is our vision of culture, how do the tools of lean, which are simply tools to bring that to life, what does that look like? We decided that it was about two things. One is about team members going home each day with a sense of fulfillment. But more importantly, it was about legacy. That's why our journey in lean is called L3, Living Legacy of Leadership. Because we realized two things. One is 50 years from now, we want people to understand what Barry-Wehmiller was meant to stand for today. We want the leadership practices that we have today to stand the test of time. And the other reason is that if we want to keep great American manufacturing jobs, we have got to do something differently. And that's what the methodology of lean allows us to do, to engage our team members in how we do things in our business and to make it better. And so that's the journey that we're on, and when we do that in the right way, with the right, and I would say for us it's probably beyond respect for people, true caring and passion for people, they're going to walk out the door every day with a sense of fulfillment.
The reason we investigated lean or continuous improvement as something to bring into our organization was all about living our guiding principles of leadership more fully and believing that there were tools and techniques and mindsets that can make us be more purposeful about how to do that. Because we were coming up against a lot of challenging items. It's one thing to, turn off locks on a phone. It's another thing to fundamentally look at the processes we use to execute our business and the ways that was frustrating people throughout the organization. Lean classically talks about waste elimination. We found that very uninspiring. but we instead talk about frustration elimination, unlocking the potential of people, and treating people like family as ways that lean could help us get to in the process. So we identified, and we heard from certain lean practitioners, that lean is all about people. But if you look at classic lean implementations, and in this many 10, 20 years ago, it wasn't focused on people at all. It was focused on waste elimination and numbers and getting to profits and really getting more out of people. And that's not the Barry-Wehmiller approach at all. So that's why we knew when we wanted to investigate this approach more for the positive mindset and tools and things that it could add, we needed to get our senior leadership team together to talk about why we were undertaking this journey, what the opportunities were, and to really get their engagement and their brain space aligned to what the opportunity was here. And so that led us to invite all of our divisional presidents and other senior corporate leaders to Green Bay, Wisconsin, to have what we call the President's Kaizen event. Kaizen just means a word meaning change for the good. So a specific event to look at how we could change our approach to processes and business systems for the good, not only of the organization, but of the people that call it home. So as we set up this meeting, it's really inviting the most senior leaders in our organization who were very open to, considering new ways of doing things, but had not had a background in lean. Many other implementations bring in a traditional sensei from Japan or a consultant who knew all the expertise of what this was, and they come in and tell you what to do. That didn't fit in with our culture, nor was it the most effective method to really define a new course for what we call our living legacy of leadership journey. So one of the important things was we didn't want to just bring lean into the organization. We wanted to bring the mindset, but combined with this people-centric, truly human focus on our guiding principles of leadership. So we defined the living legacy of leadership, or L3 journey, with a specific vision document, vision statement around how we want to do it differently than many practitioners had done it in the past. And what's been so gratifying is in the almost 10 years now since we wrote that living legacy of leadership vision, we've seen a change in the way people throughout the lean or continuous improvement community talk about this. We worked with the Association for Manufacturing Excellence as they redefine their vision as coupling enterprise excellence with people-centric leadership. We've seen this change in many other organizations, and we're thankful to be part of partnering with or supporting or learning about and raising the megaphone around this idea of truly human lean implementations. But at the time, it was bringing people in who didn't totally understand what the opportunity was or what some of the tools and traits were. So let me talk about Monday afternoon. Monday afternoon, we invited a lean consultant to come in just as an expert to share what some of these different methodologies were. And we had all of our divisional presidents in a room. Now, granted, if you've been in a manufacturing location, conference rooms aren't always the best. This was kind of a dungeon room, underground, aligning people in an afternoon to listen to a speaker, and a very well-intentioned speaker, but someone that we brought in whose first words were, lean is a way to get more out of your people. That didn't go over so well. Lean is all about waste elimination and profit improvement. Didn't go over so well, and got into some of the tools and details, but was clearly off message to what our desire was. And, after 5 or 10 minutes, Bob Chapman was kind of on his phone, rolling his eyes maybe a little bit, and after about 45 minutes of this, he got up in kind of a huff, the way that it's not, to take an important phone call, but because he was disappointed in the direction of the message, and walked out into the hallway. As the organizer of the meeting, therefore, it became my job to go out after him. And I don't know if anybody who's listening to this has had the chance to follow a senior executive, C-level leader out into the hall when he's frustrated, but it's not the most desirable thing to think about. So I'm not sure what to find in the hallway of this dungeon room beneath a manufacturing plant in Green Bay, Wisconsin. And Bob got about halfway down, and I said, Bob, what are you thinking? And he turned around and literally grabbed me by the shirt collar in that moment. And, where are we going here? And he said something that I will never forget. He said, Brian, that is not the way we're going to do our lean journey in this organization. Brian, we are not going to do this if it's not focused on truly human leadership and helping people be the best that they are. That we can have all the tools and mindsets and approaches and process improvements in the world, but if it isn't going to touch people's lives positively in the end, then we're not going to do this. And, I wasn't sure exactly what I said back at that moment, but basically, Bob, I am with you 110%. I am committed to that just as you are. I'm committed to this living legacy of leadership journey. And unfortunately, the speaker that we've set up this afternoon isn't setting us up for that message. I will get us back on track. And we had a dinner, and it was all right. Everybody stayed. They didn't, get on planes and go home. But I'm feeling very hesitant Tuesday morning as we're about to launch into the experiential part of the event. Well, fortuitously, and sometimes this is how things happen in life, there's that synchronicity or that coincidence that comes out being amazing. The previous day, our vice president of operations at the plant we were visiting in Green Bay said, Bob, you should really hear about this lean improvement that 3 people took it upon themselves to do. So at this stage, people learned a little bit about lean. There were a few items out there, but it was still just getting off the ground. So it was unusual that 3 gentlemen would take it upon themselves to, do a project on their own. And Bob said, well, why don't you have them come and speak to our entire group, and we'll have the opportunity to do that. So these guys get an email as they walk in at about 6:30 that morning, come to the executive session at 7 a.m. and share with us what you've done. I've had the chance to follow up with them after that, and I think they were mostly just wondering, what the heck am I going to say to this group, and what kind of questions are they going to ask me in the end?
And we had the event. You know how they all are. There's 30 or 40 report out. 30 or 40 people in the room. The reports start going. The first guy, Steve, steps up and says, well, had a great week. We reduced our square footage by 20%, and we eliminated 20 steps out of 30 steps in the process map. And Bob says, stop. Stop, Steve. Everybody in the room is quiet. Bob says, how did that make you feel, the participation in that event? Steve says, oh, I felt great. I had a really good time. And Bob says, no, I'm serious. I want to know, how did your heart feel? How did it make you feel? And Steve kind of thought back. Again, everybody in the room is quiet. And he says, well, I have to tell you, Bob, when I was going home at night, I was talking to my wife more. And Bob said, well, why is that? Well, going through the event, I met an engineer whose name I had seen for 10 years but never talked to him. And he's a nice guy. He doesn't mean to make bad drawings. I saw the financial person, and they're not so retentive. They can think a little bit. And most importantly, they were listening to me. I was giving suggestions, and they were actually listening to me. I felt great, so I'm telling my wife all during the week. And Bob said, so you mean to tell me that participation in a Kaizen event helped you with your relationship with your wife? He said, well, yeah. That's when I personally had my aha moment, and then I knew what Bob meant by heartfelt. We don't call people head counts. We call them heart counts. But I then knew that's what he wants us to do, so that people go home fulfilled every day, and we arm them with tools, and we provide good leadership. And if we can do that for all 5,000 people, what a great company and what a great world, great country we would be in.
Through it all, the goal has been to provide people meaningful work and a secure future. Here's Jerry Solomon talking again about how our Lean or L3 journey has affected the company.
Overall, L3 has been instrumental in the company's success. From a business point of view, using the tools, the company has freed up many millions of cash flow because we're able to flow our product much faster. Our inventory turns are up. Our on-time performance to our customers is better. Our quality has improved. So that's rewarding to the people, knowing that they're building a piece of equipment that gets installed properly. Happy customers, which means customers that will be loyal to us, and they'll be back for more purchases of equipment. So it's been tremendously positive for the business. When you look at all of that, it says we have a secure company. Everyone can be proud of what they're doing. Also, it's affected people's lives. As we go and recognize people, as they engage in improvements and become proud of what they're doing, it builds upon itself. We have a long way to go, make no mistake about it. That's the exciting part. We're at the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more we want to do and give a lot of people the opportunity.
Barry-Wehmiller and our CEO Bob Chapman were recently featured in a book called The Lean CEO, written by Jacob Stoller. In this book, Jacob talks to 28 leaders who are able to implement and use lean tools to empower people and improve their businesses for all stakeholders. It's a fresh take on leadership in business that goes beyond conventional practices. Barry-Wehmiller global messaging leader Mary Rudder and I talked to Jacob about his lean journey, why most companies fail in trying to implement lean practices, and the true power of lean.
When you're talking about lean, it's always kind of people preaching to the choir, you know. How can we share this with the outside world? And I thought the best people to do this would be CEOs who are actually leading lean, because they're the ones that have to do this at the end of the day, right? At the end of the day, they have to explain it to shareholders and media and whoever else, right? So I was interested in CEOs from that perspective. Also, there was a kind of a obvious leadership gap, I guess. In other words, if you talk to people in the lean community, they talk about this 95% rule. They say 95% of lean transformations fail because they don't have senior management support. So there was a big need there too to get the kind of CEO story out there. So I thought, talking to some CEOs is going to really make a contribution to the field here. And by the way, I was not disappointed. The CEOs really did have a very, very interesting perspective on lean, one that I hadn't seen before, and certainly Bob Chapman was one of those.
I've heard of that guy. I've heard of him. I think he's got a book out now.
Yeah, yes, he does. It's an extraordinary book.
How did you come across Bob? How did you find us?
Well, what I did when I sought out CEOs, I had a number of contacts at that point in the lean community, and I wanted to know the CEOs that were really making a difference, that were respected in the lean community, and at the same time were really, really committed, that really were following a strategy. I didn't want just to find a company that done some lean stuff and then talk to the CEO. I needed to have the CEOs that were actually connected to the whole strategy. So I talked to a number of people. I think I first discovered Barry-Wehmiller through contacts with AME. That's the Association of Manufacturing Excellence, where Bob had been giving a number of speeches.
There's a number of companies that you talk about in your book. How'd you find all of them, and how'd you put them all together for what you wanted to say in the Lean CEO?
Well, I found them, from various sources, but again, they were people that I respected in the lean community, and but in terms of organizing them and approaching them, I wanted to let the CEOs talk in their own terms, and I saw a big danger, and as I've been writing articles for a while now, there's a certain danger in coming with a bunch of assumptions or preset questions, and then you hear what you want to hear, right? So I wanted to let the CEOs talk really in their own terms. So I really emphasized that. So I didn't know exactly where the book would take me, but what I expected was very different from what happened. I had this view of CEOs in a very structured sort of way, right? Like I saw, well, there's certain competencies that leaders have. There's A, B, C, and D. They have all these things, and I'll find a bunch of leaders that because they're practicing lean, they're all going to be similar, and they'll all, I can put everything in nice little cubby holes, right? But it didn't turn out that way. I found out that here are these leaders, they had very different personalities, very different styles, and yet they shared some core beliefs that were very, very strong. So that's really what pulled everything together in terms of the book. When you read these stories over and over again, you see that these people went on journeys, and sometimes they didn't start that way, but you wind up with a very, very strong belief in people and a sort of a leap of faith that if you trust people to do their best, they're really going to come through for you.
So is that the core belief that you're talking about there, this trust in people, or is there more to that, these core beliefs that you saw throughout these different CEOs?
I think the trust in people is the most important thing. There are core beliefs. I mean, you believe in certain information systems, right? Like, so you believe, right, the lean leaders, for example, They don't believe so much in what their standard cost reports are telling them. They're much more interested in sort of value stream metrics, right? Like, are we improving our customer delivery or whatever? So that's on the information level. There's also a belief in continuous improvement, and I saw that, for example, they don't believe in so much. It's not as much product strategy as it is simply doing a better job. I mean, if we continuously improve how we do things for the customer, we're going to win competitively, right? So I think there was a belief there, but all of it rests on people, because you have to believe. And at the end of the day, if you look at the way the lean system set up, there's just an enormous amount of trust there. If people weren't willing to do a good job and contribute creatively and stuff like that, the whole system just wouldn't stand up.
You said something earlier about how 95% of companies don't succeed when it comes to implementing lean strategies. Do you think that's because there's not that inherent trust in people there?
Absolutely. I think that's an important thing for sure. And lean, if you look at lean just as a bunch of tools, they don't have any kind of moral compass, right? You can do lean tools and you can do some awful things with them, right? You can use them to cut jobs and fire people and all sorts of things. But so I think there's two parts to this, right? There's an aspiration, like what kind of company do you want to run? And Bob Chapman's made it very clear, he does not want to run a company that takes advantage of people and fires them whenever he gets a chance. So the aspiration is there. But then there's a leap of faith that if I do trust people, they're going to come through to me, that this is a sustainable strategy. So I think both parts of that are really, really important. But yeah, you're absolutely right. When we take that 95% rule, you really need to have senior leaders saying, this is the way we're going to run the business. And the reason why you need senior leaders to do that is because we're going against what people taught in business school, right? So everybody is going to do what they learned in school unless you have a leader that's willing to stand up and say, no, this is how we're going to do it. We're going to do this very differently. We're going to build our company based on people.
Explain that a little bit, what the difference is between a lean way of thinking and what is taught in business school.
Well, I think business school essentially treats people as if they're kind of like cogs in a machine, right? So you look at the number of hours of labor and you look at the cost of hiring them and you say, well, how can I reduce the costs per person? Like, what are ways I can manipulate things in order to do that? So that's what business school is about. I think if you start from a different standpoint, I guess I would use maybe an analogy of company A and company B. I mean, let's say you have a company that runs where every person goes to work, and they go to work to do what their boss tells them, right? So they say, well, that's my work. I arrive at 9 o'clock. My boss gives me this and this and that to do. I'm not going to ask a lot of questions. I'm going to do what I'm told, and then at 5 I'm going to leave. Well, let's say you have company B, a completely different model. Let's just say every person comes into work, and the whole idea is that your job is to contribute, to share your gifts, and to contribute to the value that you're providing your customers. So the person comes into work and says, I've been told that my job is to find out how we can do a better job of serving our customers. And furthermore, my boss has told me we're going to give you the tools to do this. And if I have any problems, I'm supposed to let them know because it's their job to help me. So now if you think you compare company A and company B and just look at what people are doing there, who's going to be more productive, right? I mean, I think everything else being equal, company B is just going to have people that are more engaged, they're more empowered, they've got a higher level of energy, and so that's the strategy, right? That's a people-based strategy for winning, and I think it's been proven that it works.
Yeah, one of the pillars of lean is respect for people, but yet that is one of the ones that has been overlooked, and so when people want to embrace lean, yet they ignore that. I mean, that's what I don't understand is where is How can they embrace lean without following the successes of those that have come before them by having that respect for people? Why is that still not the case?
Well, no, you're right, and it absolutely, if you were going to follow lean, in the mold of the Toyota way, the respect for people becomes, an absolute pillar there. But I think this is something that Bob has said very well. You look at a lot of things like respect for people are often practiced in the mode of a value statement that you put on a wall, right? And as Bob has said many times, Enron had fabulous mission statements, right? You look at the memos that Ken Lay sent out to his employees, right? So it's not just about mission statements. And that's why I have this idea of leaps of faith, right? So I don't care what the CEO is willing to put on a plaque on the wall. What I care about is, will they bet the farm on it, right? Are they willing to put everything on the line based on their trust in people? That's the real determinant.
Share with us one of your favorite stories from the book, Jacob.
Oh gosh, there's so many of them, and I'm not going to retell one of yours because I think, if you're going to have a podcast on your website, I'm sure you've heard Bob's stories, but I want to share one that I did tell, and it's somewhat similar to Bob's, and this is actually about someone who's also called Bob. It's about a worker at an organization called Northwest Center, and Northwest Center is a group of companies in Seattle, and the way they're set, what they do is they provide employment for people that have what we call disabilities. They're people that are cognitively not able to communicate the way you and I communicate, or they don't learn in the same ways either. Anyway, it's a story about a worker called Bob, and when he had started at Northwest Center, after a day or two, the supervisors noticed that there was some problems with his work. He was making mistakes, and his job was to this was an electronics assembly branch of their business, and his job was to make brushes for electric motors. And they noticed that the brushes that he was making were they were faulty. There was something wrong with them. Now, what they did was when somebody like Bob made mistakes, they figured out this is because of his condition, right? So what they did is they put an inspector there to inspect all the brushes he was making, because they say, well, he has this condition, we have to fix the brushes. And this made perfect sense. This was the way the social workers did things there at Northwest Center. But it did not make sense at all to the new vice president of manufacturing. And this was a guy named Mike Quinn. And Mike was hired with a new CEO that had started there. And the whole idea was, we've got to stop treating people in this organization as if they can't do things. So, initially, just to back up a minute, Northwest Center had a model where they ran divisions at a loss, and they subsidized them with other divisions. So they would hire so-called normal people in one division, and they would make profit, and then they would use the profit to subsidize work that workers like Bob did. All right. So Mike Quinn thought, well, we don't have to run the company this way. There's no reason why people with disabilities can't do good, high-quality work. So he had really set out to do that. So this whole idea of taking Bob and inspecting his work just didn't make sense to Mike. Mike didn't like that idea. He said, listen, we got to watch Bob and watch what he does and understand why he's making defective brushes. So, he asked the supervisor to do this, and the supervisor goes out with his clipboard and goes, and what does he do? He talks to the inspector, right? And he says, gets his information, comes back and says, well, Bob is making defective brushes. We've noticed that he's making 6 a day, and they all have the same problem. The screws aren't tight on the brushes. And so Mike asked what any lean supervisor person or lean person would ask. He'd say, well, why? What's he doing? Has anyone seen him actually make a defective brush? So he sent the supervisor back, and the supervisor goes and watches. And then something happened. The battery on Bob's cordless drill ran out. And so Bob put down the drill, or it's actually cordless screwdriver, I guess I should have said. But he puts down the cordless screwdriver, puts down the brush, and then he stands there waiting for a job coach to come and change the battery on his electric screwdriver, right? So Mike says, well, Mike heard about this. He said, well, this is crazy. Bob gets up in the morning, he gets dressed, he catches a bus into work. Surely we can train him to change the batteries on his screwdriver. And, it turned out that despite what the books all said about Bob's condition, he was able to learn this in a few minutes. And now here's the interesting part. So when Bob got back to work, the defects dropped to 0. And so he's doing perfect quality, and his output got to be so high that after a couple of days, they had to add 2 additional assembly stations behind him to process all the brushes he was making. So, just by respecting this guy and that he really wants to do a good job, we've eliminated the need for an inspector, and we've tripled his productivity, and it's all because Bob wanted to do a good job. There's no whip cracking over him. He may not talk like us and listen like us. So I think the lesson here, and why I think this story is so important to every organization, is that wanting to do a good job is a basic human need. This is something we can bet the farm on. And by the way, if you want to talk about numbers, Northwest Center over 3 years, when they started this program, the revenues multiplied by 500%. All the divisions are profitable with all the different abilities of people, and and now they're raising their sights. They're now doing work which so-called normal people can't do, because they have people, for example, with autism who do incredible work with quality, are just incredibly effective at quality control. So again, it's just about empowering people is just such a powerful thing, and I think people don't realize that. The beauty of lean is that it's based on processes. If it's okay, I could tell you another story that really illustrates that, because there was a watershed moment, I think, in the history of lean. Yeah, lean was not seen as something you would apply in healthcare. Maybe in the 1980s or something like that. But the story really is, I think this watershed moment happened in Wisconsin, and this is John Toussaint, who's one of the CEOs in the book as well. But they were, as you know, healthcare has a quality problem, which is very, very severe. You're talking about, when you have quality problems in healthcare, it means people are dying. And I don't know what the correct numbers are today. There's a lot of dispute about that. But around the time this story I'm going to tell you takes place, there was a study out saying that there were 100,000 deaths a year in America due to preventable medical error in hospitals. So that's a starting point. And there's people now that think the numbers are much higher. But the story is that John Toussaint was CEO of an organization called ThedaCare, and was very, very concerned about this quality problem. And he'd been trying to find ways to deal with it for years previous to that. And the whole quality thing in healthcare, they had some practices that they were working on, but they just weren't making any headway. It was they were just having a tough time. So, John Toussaint realized, just looking outside of healthcare, there was all kinds of amazing things happening. He saw that in aerospace and automotive, they were getting their defects down to 0, or near 0, and here they were in healthcare with double-digit defects. So he said, well, how can we fix this? So he started to look at lean, and he wound up touring a lean plant in nearby in Brillion, Wisconsin, which is Ariens, and they make snowblowers. So he has his whole senior management team, and you can imagine this group of doctors walking through a factory. I mean, it was probably hadn't been done before, and they're looking at that and pretty impressed. But the real aha moment came when they got to the final assembly area, and here you have, snowblowers or nearly completed snowblowers moving along on carts, right? And all these people kind of helping each other and sharing information and stuff like that. And John Toussaint had this flash. He said, there's not that much difference between a snowblower on a cart and a patient on a gurney. It's they're helping each other. And I guess the great quote he said is, these people are taking better care of the snowblowers than we're taking care of patients. So, I asked Dan Ariens, this is quite a thing for him to say. Dan Ariens is the CEO of that snowblower factory. I asked him, what did they see? And he said, they weren't looking at snowblowers. They were looking at the process, right? They were looking at the way people were working together. It was the communication. It was how they presented tools to each other. And that's completely universal, right? You can have a process in healthcare, you can have a process in government, you can have a process in manufacturing, and process in a hotel. It's how you're documenting your processes, how you're standardizing your work, and how people are helping each other is the really big deal. And I think another great example is if you go to some of the AIM conferences, for example, where Bob is giving a lot of his talks, you can see people in financial services, in healthcare, in manufacturing, they're all going to the same workshops, right? And then they're all sitting around the lunch table talking around the same problem. So processes is a universal language, and it can be any kind of endeavor where you can do this. It's all about people and communication and improvement.
Don't forget to find us and connect on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter at Barry-Wehmiller. And you can find more podcasts, articles, and videos at trulyhumanleadership.com. I'm Brent Stewart. Thanks for listening.